Hello friends, welcome. My name is Lisa Graustein, and this is the third set of videos I'm doing as part of the virtual plenary this year for New England Yearly Meeting. Our theme is Provoke One Another to Love. And in this set of 3 videos, I'm going to be looking at our minutes on climate change. So as with most of these sessions, I want to start by getting us a little grounded and do some embodied listening throughout this video or podcast. And so wherever you are, the invitation is to put your feet flat on the floor, straighten your spine a little bit, take a deep breath and intentionally connect with your divine center. And to just bring some attention to your breath and to your body. And as you bring that attention to your body, you notice how you're sitting or standing, where you are, what you're in contact with. And throughout the course of watching this video, listening to this podcast, of just noticing what shifts and moves and comes up in your body. That in the same way we're going to listen and pay attention to what comes up in our body, we're also going to listen and pay attention to our feelings. That whatever comes up for you is important information. And so just notice how you're feeling right now, wherever you are, what's live for you. Similarly, as you continue to breathe deeply and get centered and grounded, notice where and how energy is moving in your body, where it might be stuck, where there might be a lot, or maybe we need to send some. Take just a moment and pay attention to your whole self, your whole being in this space, and bringing conscious presence to it. And as you pay attention to yourself, also pay attention to that which you know. And this isn't about intellectual knowing, or I read that article, or I heard that statistic, but the deeper knowing, the knowing that comes from spirit guidance, that comes from listening to our beings, our spirits, our bodies, our ancestors. And as we're looking particularly at minutes on climate change, the invitation is also wherever you are to bring some attention to the natural world. So I expect most of us are watching this video or listening inside, but where we are feeling air on our body, particularly the parts of our skin that are exposed and not clothed, where and how we are in relationship to the sun or the moon, if it's daytime or nighttime. I'm sitting at home, my feet are on a wooden floor, so trees that once were that now support my family and our home. And just bringing awareness to where and how in this day you are connecting with the natural world, where your points of contact are, where your points of separation are, and how they're showing up. So let's take another deep breath together, and then we'll move into our minutes. So over the last few years, our yearly meeting has approved several minutes around climate change that we have been wrestling for a while with. What is our part in working to mitigate and change the trajectory of climate change? So here's a minute from 2016. Friends at New England Yearly Meeting annual sessions at Castleton, Vermont, August 6th through 11th, 2016, have heard a divine call to the witness of addressing climate change. We affirm the overwhelming scientific consensus that greenhouse gases released by human activity are causing climate change, and that these changes threaten life on our planet as we know it, and that we have a responsibility to address the very real threats that will impact both rich and poor. Those on Earth who have contributed least to this crisis are likely to suffer most from it. This is not just one concern among many to be carried by only some among us. We all live on this planet and are all complicit in altering its climate. It is incumbent upon every friend and every friend's meeting to discover how God is leading us to do our part to reverse this great threat. As in past times of crisis, the strength and love of our community life will make it possible for friends to see to what they are called and carry it out faithfully, whatever the cost. We can engage with each other tenderly and hold each other lovingly accountable to move from fear into courage in response to this crisis. This is the manner in which friends have always responded to great moral challenges of their own time. Recognizing that we, gathered here, are shaped and limited by our own economic and social positions, nevertheless, the divine witness challenges us in compassion and in love for all children of God and for the beautiful earth to pray, wait, and act with a focus and fearlessness appropriate to the urgency of the times. Love requires it of us. So here we're making a commitment to pray, wait, and act. That same yearly meeting, we approved this minute too. Gathered in our midst this week are those who are led to take bold public prophetic action. These friends, gathered as a working group, will convene early this fall for discernment of God's leading into ongoing nonviolent direct action for climate justice, rooted in the vision of faithfulness described movingly by Doug Quinn in our Bible half hours this week. We will listen to how we will, as a yearly meeting, collaborate with and support the actions of this working group. Building on the minute we have adopted on climate change this session, we will ask each monthly meeting and constituent body of the yearly meeting to enter into an intentional process of discerning God's leading for each meeting and its members to take concrete action and to commit to taking action before next sessions. What further steps God is calling us to take as a yearly meeting to address this issue. New England Yearly Meeting will hold a consultation in the spring of 2017 to receive what has risen during the year and to discern together where the yearly meeting is being led. So as a body, we weren't in a place to make a commitment at this time, but a small group of friends were, and they gathered together to form this working group. And we were all charged with really listening for how we were led to address climate change within our monthly meetings and our lives. So the following year, here's the minute that comes back to us. The Earth Care Ministry Committee is not bringing back a request for New England Yearly Meeting to sign or endorse the Paris Climate Accord. It's become clear we're not ready at this time to consider that request. Instead, we're offering the following, which requires no action today. So the Paris Climate Accord was something that many nations around the world, the United States did not, and nations, nonprofits, businesses, groups in the United States independently signed on as a way of at least bringing some United States presence into the global conversation around the Paris Climate Accord. If you're interested in learning more, if you click on the link below that goes to the yearly meeting webpage, there's links where you can learn more about the Paris Climate Accord and what friends are doing. At this time in 2007, we as a yearly meeting were not in unity to endorse the Paris Climate Accord. But what we did do is this. At sessions this year, we reaffirmed the 2016 Climate Minute, indicating that we will pray, wait, and act with a focus and fearlessness appropriate to the urgency of the times. The Earth Care Ministry Committee believes that setting concrete goals to reduce our emissions in line with a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature rise, the aspirational goal of the Paris Climate Accord, would be helpful for our next steps. The committee will coordinate collecting carbon emission data as a basis for proposing a percentage emissions reduction goal for the yearly meeting. That proposal will come back to sessions in 2018 for consideration. So Earth Care Ministry was sort of charged on our behalf to do some work and bring back a proposal for us, which happened the next year, 2018, this past summer. Earth Care Ministry has faithfully carried out this charge and now brings us the following proposal. New England Yearly Meeting gathered at annual sessions at Castleton University, August 2018, approved the following. We have minuted that we will act with a focus and fearlessness appropriate to the urgency of the time. We must do more than symbolic actions. As a blessed community, we will act to reduce our contribution to climate dysregulation. To do this, we must be assessing our current impact and taking concrete steps to reduce this. All New England Yearly Meeting members and constituent meetings are encouraged to assess their carbon emissions using the Cape Cod Climate Change Collaborative's Carbon Calculator. This will create a baseline assessment of New England Yearly Meeting's carbon footprint. Multiple tablets are available as a resource to help individuals and meetings perform this assessment. These baseline assessments should be completed by December 20th, 2018. After performing this baseline assessment, individuals and meetings are asked to commit to a 10% carbon emissions reduction over a one-year period ending on December 20th, 2019. The recommended carbon calculator also contains a long list of possible actions to reduce a carbon footprint. Of paramount importance, friends are asked to prayerfully engage in these suggested carbon-reducing actions as led to either begin or continue the journey towards creating ecological and social justice for all of God's creation, living into the beloved community. Marginalized communities are often disproportionately impacted by global climate change. Meetings are further encouraged to seek ways of helping our neighbors who may not have the resources we do to also act to reduce their carbon footprint. So what we committed to is this call to action of a 10% reduction of our collective and individual carbon footprint. So the first step is to assess our own and our meeting's carbon footprint. If you didn't do this by December 20th, that's fine, you can still do it. And then this year, we're taking 2019, the calendar year, to reduce our footprint by 10%. And we're called to actively support not just our Quaker congregations and meetings, but our local communities in lowering the footprint, and to share resources that we have in our community with our local communities who might not have those resources to do that work. And so we're moving from talk and discernment and prayer to prayerful action. And so here's the link to the climate calculator. It's climatecalculator.org, climatecalculator.html. It's also on the link below if you click onto the web page there, and you can go and fill it out. And I want to highlight something about our shifting understanding that emerges over these 3 years of minutes. So in 2016, we say those on Earth who have contributed least to this crisis are likely to suffer most from it. We all live on this planet and are all complicit in altering its climate. And so I've highlighted in blue the two parts I want to talk about, that those who've contributed least are likely to suffer. Those who contribute least to climate crisis, people who are living at a subsistence level, who are living on a few dollars a day, have already been suffering the most for decades, if not centuries. And the we in the second sentence there, it might be just interpreted just as we Quakers. But when we think globally, everybody does have an impact on the earth, but again, people who are living at a subsistence level, who are living on or barely subsistence level, have a minimal impact, and sometimes often are doing practices that sequester carbon into the environment. And so what we really need to look at this is not we're all complicit, but look at how each one of us and our communities are complicit, and that those of us who live in North America, those of us who, like me, live on the power grid, use oil heat, drive a car, I am complicit at a very, very high level, and that the United States is the leading nation in carbon emissions, in having a global footprint that is altering climate change, that as an incredibly wealthy nation, as a large nation, as a nation that controls a lot of aspects of different industries, our footprint is huge. And so when we talk about complicity, we need to talk about the fullness of our complicity in this. By 2018, our understanding has nuanced, and we recognize that marginalized communities are often disproportionately impacted by global climate change. Meetings are further encouraged to seek ways of helping our neighbors who may not have the resources we do to act to reduce their carbon footprint. So what shifts for us between 2016 and 2018 is we understand that the climate crisis is not something that is coming, but is something that has been happening for a long time, and that those of us who live in the United States, who live at a middle class or higher economic level, who don't work in seasonal trades, who aren't farmers, who don't work in maritime industries, for the most part, our lives are pretty buttressed from climate change. The weather might change, but our day-to-day lives aren't. People who are living off the grid, who are farmers, who are working in the maritime trades, or who work jobs that depend on seasonal weather showing up when it's supposed to, their lives have already been impacted. And we know that for indigenous populations, for other marginalized populations, climate change has been a multi-generational, multi-century impact on their livelihoods. And so the shifting in our understanding is part of our deeper decolonizing work. And when we talk about decolonizing, what we're talking about is interrupting the assumptions, patterns, and power dynamics of colonization by centering indigenous and ancestral ways of being, thinking, and doing. So decolonizing is about seeking healing and living in ways that bring about justice and wholeness. And I wanted to raise this up because often when we talk about climate change and we talk about our minute challenging white supremacy, they're seen as separate pieces, as separate work, as separate committees. Similarly with our minute repudiating the doctrine of discovery. But really these 3 minutes, repudiating the doctrine of discovery, challenging white supremacy, and reducing environmental impact and addressing climate change, are 3 interlinked minutes that when we can bring them into conversation with each other, each of them becomes fuller and stronger, our work becomes clearer, and we get closer into living into right relationship with all peoples in creation, and our ability to create the beloved community expands. That climate change and racial justice work are 2 parts of the same whole. And when we can look at that, we understand that those of us who experience white privilege, who experience the privilege of having documentation, class privilege, educational privilege, we are buffered from climate change in a way that many people on this hemisphere and on this earth are not. And so the reality of climate change is not a crisis that is coming. It is a crisis that has been here for a while and is accelerating. And similarly, when we can look at racial justice through a lens of environmental impact, we understand that the racial justice work we're called to is not just about how do we treat and act each other differently, but how do we ensure that the environments, the spaces in which we're all living are as healthy as they can be and sustaining of life as they can be. And so the invitation here is to start to weave these 3 minutes together to deepen our understanding of how God is calling us to live out into the world and the tools that we now have at our disposal to create the beloved community and to interrupt all these systems of oppression and environmental degradation. So the reflection questions here are, as you listen to this, what did you notice in your body? How are you feeling right now, physically, emotionally, energetically? What came up for you? 2, what are you actively working on next to decrease your footprint and environmental impact? It doesn't matter where you are, it matters what we're all doing next to take this step to decrease our impact by 10%. And I just want to say, as someone who tried to give up plastics for Lent, I failed tremendously. And so this is a hard thing to do, but we need to be talking about it, which leads me to our 3rd question. How can your Quaker community best support you in continuing to decrease your footprint? How can you support your meeting or church in reducing its footprint? None of us are going to be successful doing this alone. We're going to do better when we can ask for the support we need. The next video in this series is going to look at some of the patterns of oppression and behavior that come out of the way that we relate to climate and the environment, and Quaker tools for what we can do to change that. So thank you for watching, friends.